So how do you know if you're a 5 on the Enneagram or not? It can be really tricky. There's a lot of subtle layers to check, but I've put everything that I've learned from many years of working with clients and leaders and coaches who use the Enneagram almost every day to compile these 5 nuggets or insights to help you to determine if you're a 5 or not. So what I will unpack for you are these 5 insights. First of all, I'm going to share with you a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, humorous soundbite that I use, especially when I think somebody might be a 5. And this really helps to exaggerate and highlight the possibility. And then we're going to layer on top of that the blue pearl understanding of the 5. And on top of that, the polarity aspect and expression of the type. And finally, the harmonic of the type, which really helps to crystallize some final subtle differences between 5 and other Enneagram types. And we're going to put a bow on it by focusing on the growth path of a 5 to see what you relate to, what you don't relate to. And by the end of this, you should have many more clues to help you to determine whether you are, in fact, a 5 on the Enneagram. During the lockdowns of a couple of years ago, there was a meme floating around. And the meme was this: 5s on the Enneagram have been preparing for this lockdown their whole life because they've been practicing social distancing the whole time. So we smile, and it's a little bit of, tongue-in-cheek humor, folks. But one of the key distinguishing factors for 5 is that even 5s who have, quote unquote, learned how to work more comfortably in social settings, so you're less introverted, more social 5s, still understand the value of their personal space. And you'll see when we connect this into the blue pearl and some of the deeper insights into 5, this whole idea of standing apart, of needing space, and actually preferring not to be forced to hug and close that space, especially with strangers. And it's not to say 5s can't hug. Some of the 5s I've known have really been brilliant huggers, but it's very selective. It's very selective. And what you get from the 5 is this real sense that around them is this space, and the space is protected. The space is needed. And I'm going to unpack for you how that connects to the blue pearl, the polarity, so that you put it all together. Very important with the Enneagram is not to see any individual words in isolation. You do want to connect them and weave a thread throughout the full understanding, because otherwise what happens for many of us, myself included many years ago, when I was learning the Enneagram, is that we go, oh, I relate to that one thing, but not that one thing. So you do want to see this presented as a unit in order to really fully understand what 5 on the Enneagram is all about. So instead of referring to the Enneagram triads in the traditional way, which is to talk about types 5, 6, and 7, for example, belonging to the head group or the fear types, as often is labeled, I started using the metaphor of the pearl because the pearl reminds us of a very important thing, and that is this: the Enneagram is not based on what we do. It's not based on our behavior. And when we think it is, we get confused because we end up saying, but I can do that. I can do that. I relate to that. I relate to this. The Enneagram is actually based on the deeper reason, the why behind the doing. Why do we do that? That shows us the Enneagram type. We can all do similar things. We can even do the same things. But why do we do it? So a 9 and a 5 often are mistyped because they both do the space thing. They both can sit on the edge observing. But why are they creating that space? 5 does this for a blue pearl reason, not a red pearl reason, which is a 9. To help you with this, there are 4 keywords that I use together to describe and understand that grain of sand in the pearl. Just like an oyster coats a grain of sand to not hurt, to not feel irritated by it, to protect itself in some way, and then eventually all the layers form a beautiful pearl, our personalities are the same. So these 4 key words form that grain of sand that's in common for 5, 6, and 7. Then I will show you how 5 specifically copes with and expresses that pearl uniquely as opposed to 6 and 7. These 4 words, again, very important to see them working together as a unit, not to take one word like fear, for example, and to say, well, I relate to fear. Does that mean I'm a blue pearl? We all experience fear. We all experience anger. We all experience shame. But is it a driver? Is it a primary driver? Does it inform our decision making? Does it influence how we show up in the world? That's where you start to find the deeper reasons behind the behavior, and that's where you see the type. Plus, we can't see fear on its own. We do need to connect it and join the dots to the other aspects of the pearl's grain of sand. So let's look at each one. So what is meant by this center of intelligence that we label headspace, right? We do mean thinking. We do mean analyzing. And this is a dominant center of gravity for our blue pearls. And of course, if you're a 5 on the Enneagram, you do spend a lot of time focused on your thoughts. Now, it's not to say others don't. Thoughts do play a big role in shaping many of our realities. But I invite you to think of these as 3 separate but connected centers of intelligence: the head, the heart, and the gut. And instead of thinking of mind as only here, we might even stretch our understanding of mind to think about the heart as a kind of intelligence and the gut as a kind of intelligence, a different expression of mind, if we wanted to use that language. So when we talk about the blue pearls, and I'm really trying to meet the blue pearls with more blue pearl language now, we go into the space of I need to think about it in order to move forward. Now you will see that 5, 6, and 7 think about it differently, okay? And so we need to be careful not to see all of the blue pearls managing the mind in exactly the same way, because they don't. If you're a 5, your thought processing power, your logic, your reasoning, your thinking things through is very strong. It's very strong. And it has a relationship to fear. Now, when we say the word fear, again, I invite you not to be thinking of it in isolation. So one of the best things I know to do here is to think of it as low volume to high volume. Actually learned that from a client once. She said, Cole, is it a volume control thing? And I'm like, yes, how brilliant, genius. We'll use that immediately. So low volume fear, we might not even think of as fear. What is low volume fear? Caution, anxiety, jittery, hesitant, even doubt can be an expression of low volume fear. Compare that to high volume fear, where we can be paralyzed by our fear, where there is almost a sense of even terror. So the blue pill lives in that expression when it is triggered, when it is under duress. Now that so far makes sense. My mind and my thoughts running, and I'm using my mind in order to try and minimize fear. Okay, that's important. I'm using my mind to try and minimize fear, and my mind is contributing to my fear. Now we add the word separation, and this one usually throws people. But let me do my best to explain it as simply as I can. If you go back to the mind labels things. It's its job. So think about when you were a little kid and you were learning the difference between a triangle and a circle, for example. We get labels. That's a triangle. And we get labels. This is a circle. And we do that to be able to separate them out. So another word for separation is discernment. I can now discern, oh, that over there is not a circle, it's a triangle. And I can discern, oh, that is a circle over here. This is a circle, that's a triangle. They're different. So we use the mind and we use thinking and we use labels to separate things out. Now, what happens is that is a function that we all have. It's all part of how we're wired. But for our 5 on the Enneagram and for all our blue pearls, this dividing, polarizing, labeling is very strong. It's connected to fear and it's connected to the mind. And now already there should be a clue there. We joked about, well, I joked about social distancing, and my clients and I have shared a laugh about this. It just lands so beautifully for our 5s. So this idea of social distancing, what is social distancing? It is a form of separating. So what you have here is your 5 separating from engagement from people in order to appease anxiety, in order to feel safer, in order to feel like I'm watching from a distance, separating what? For what purpose? To gather information. Because if I'm observing from a distance with that space and that separateness between us, that is a 5's way of coping with their fear. That's a 5's way of gathering the information their mind needs in order to feel okay, in order to minimize and reduce anxiety and fear. Now we start to understand, oh wow, that's how the pearl operates, and that's how the pearl expresses through a 5. So do you relate to that? How much do you relate to that? That's going to be a big clue. Now let's connect that to the polarity. Now I'll tell you, it took me many years to settle on the polarity words for 5. And I'll admit, it's good enough. I wish I'd found a word that landed a little bit stronger, but it's good enough to work with and it's reliable. I would say it's a toss-up between I'm competent versus incompetent and knowledge versus ignorance, and knowledgeable versus ignorant on some days seems like a better polarity. But let's just unpack this now. Either way, you're going to learn something and you're going to hopefully be able to use this as clue gathering to determine whether you are a 5 or not. So what the polarities mean is you want to think about every personality type having a push-pull inside of it, where if you imagine a pendulum swinging, the pendulum is trying to stay on one side and not move to the other side. So for our type 5 on the Enneagram, it's trying to stay in the realm of competence. It's trying to avoid incompetence because incompetence triggers fear for a 5 on the Enneagram. With the word competent can also come knowledgeable, But the thing is, not all fives are academic or knowledge seeking. So that's where it becomes tricky. A lot are, but not all. So let's connect the dots here. It's the mind seeking competence. It's not competency as in the body. You know, somebody might get really competent at ice skating or skiing. And yes, there's a technical mind component to that, but there's also a very physical component to that competency. And that's actually a big clue about understanding our fives. Our fives, I joke sometimes, because of the separating function, because of trying desperately to be competent through observing, gathering information through observing, frightened, however, of being incompetent, it creates this ironic expression that sounds like this. Our beautiful fives can be studying swimming, getting 3 PhDs in swimming, researching swimming, but still not climbing in the pool. Because this is a blue pearl competency, that it leans, our fives lean into knowledge and information, if not knowledge, and thinking instead of doing. So what this turns into is a lack of applied knowledge or a fear of doing. I'd rather think about swimming than swim. And here's the irony, of course. Can we ever get good at swimming without eventually jumping in the pool? And this is where our fives really relate to this idea of observer, cool, neutral, poker face. Not all, but many have a kind of poker face. This outer stillness doesn't mean that it's still on the inside. The mind is very busy on the inside. And this separateness is trying to gather information, frightened of not being competent, but struggling to get into a place of doing where competency is really anchored. So have a look at some of the keywords here for this expression. A lot of folks will see fives as aloof. They're not necessarily actually aloof. In fact, some of my clients who are fives, they have massive hearts, but the mind is up front and center. And this separation from life or from people and from the swimming pool of life can actually create this aloof posture. They have laser-like minds, very intense, deep powers of observation. So there's a lot of observing. There's a lot of watching to think. Very much the hermit, the isolation is a big part of how that separation part of the pearl expresses. In order to investigate, it can create a feeling of ivory-tower living, where you're living in the loft instead of living down on the ground. The ivory tower can be an academic or a theoretical approach to life. There can be the sense of solitary, alone, perceptive, analyzing, and you can see how this all packages into this feeling of detachment, this coolness, which is all coming from the pearl, expressed through the polarity. And now you have the essence of the type, and I'm wondering what you're relating to, what you aren't relating to, how this is landing for you. And now we're going to add the last two pieces to really put those last two pieces of the puzzle together. One of the many gems of insight that the Enneagram teachers Riso and Hudson brought to life and brought to us through their writing and teaching was the harmonics. So in true Cole style, I have taken the understanding of the harmonics and simplified it, used some of my own alliteration. Yes, let's see how the harmonic that 5 belongs to can help you to add another clue to your mission of determining whether you are truly a 5 on the Enneagram. So types 1, 3, and 5 share the what I call the practical harmonic, which is often actually called the competency harmonic. So what we mean by this is that our type 5, along with 3 and 1, all need something specific in order to make that first point of contact, bonding and connecting, especially in relationships, in teams. What you will find is that the practical harmonic wants to bond through roll up sleeves, have a conversation that is useful, practical, in other words, pragmatic. How do we solve the problem? How do we make another step in the right direction? How do we do something useful or talk about something useful? That is how this harmonic relates, connects, and bonds, as opposed to the positivity harmonic that wants something affirming and uplifting first before they get practical, or the purge harmonic, which I call the purge harmonic, which wants some venting time, some safe space to share their feelings or their thoughts or their irritations, etc. So this is something to think about. Do you have that in you? Do you find yourself hearing a positive harmonic or a purge harmonic and thinking, can't we just get straight to doing something useful, talking about something practical? Why do we need all the positive stuff? Why do we need all the purging? And if that's landing for you, you've got another clue supporting that you might indeed be a 5 on the Enneagram. If not, you might want to look at some of the other harmonic groups. Let's put a bow on this by talking about the growth path of 5. So the language that I like to use to really communicate the growth paths is to, in fact, think of them as doorways. And the low expression of each type has the door closed to another type that is a key to its wholeness and to its high expression. So, for example, 5 on the Enneagram has a doorway, a path, a connection to 8. If that door is closed, what it means is it cannot access some of the best 8 characteristics which it needs, which 5 needs in order to be whole and complete and to shine. Like an apple tree needs water and sunshine in order to grow. These are very important, specific clues to our unique growth. So a 5 needs the best of 8 to grow. When a 5 is at its lowest expression and there's a lack of 8, that helps us to actually understand what a low 5 looks like. Because a lack of 8 almost perfectly describes, that's how I know I am at my lowest expression if I'm speaking for 5. Now, of course, this can come and go. It depends on your life circumstances, personal growth, whether we're going through tough times or not. But when a 5 is in its lowest expression, it lacks the 8, it lacks confidence, it lacks assertion, it lacks even the ability to just move into swift action, which of course I have already emphasized through the descriptions of the polarity, etc. So it literally is, I'm going to just socially distance. I'm not going to participate. I'm going to keep thinking because I don't feel competent enough. I'm not going to jump in the pool. And there is this lack of this gut, physically felt, confident, applied knowledge, which describes perfectly our low functioning 8. So if you relate to that, it's a big clue. As a 5 grows and can access more of the 8, they move into more action. But you need to think about your whole life here. Have you always struggled to move into the action stage, to apply it, to engage, to get out of the tower, so to speak, and go be on the ground, to jump in the pool instead of continuing to study? If the answer is yes, even if you've improved that, even if it's taken a lot of work and courage and life sort of pushing you and all of those good things. Even if you're now much more active in the world, I've got 5 clients who are leaders, who are out there, but they know this in them. They know this tendency and they know that it has been there. If you can't relate at all, then you need to question 5. If you're like, oh, but I've always just done, I just jump in, and I do like to think, but I just jump in, then you must question it. So that's why understanding the growth path is so important as a final clue to put a bow on this and to see whether truly you relate to this Enneagram type or not. And of course, it's so important to remember that we are always more than our Enneagram type. If you want to think of your type as your operating system, it's like the software, but you are always more than your software. Then when we learn the Enneagram and we understand what pattern, what program we are working with, we can help ourselves to upgrade, to keep our updates in check so that we can operate at our highest expression. And that, of course, is the gift, ultimately, if we are willing or if we are able to step up to that kind of gift and receive it fully. If this tutorial is helpful and it's given you something, or if you know somebody that's trying to figure out if they're a 5 or not, and you might want to forward this video to them. But either way, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, all those good things. And thank you very, very much.